Thank you all so much for joining us. Again, my name is Folabi Olagbaju, and I will be your moderator for this panel, for this town hall today. I want to begin the program with a note of gratitude to our co-sponsors, starting with the Protect the Protest Coalition and members like Amnesty International USA, the International Corporate Accountability Roundtable, that is called ICA. Other co-sponsors, as you can see on the slide, the Institute for Policy Studies, Equation Campaign, DEMCAST, American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, which is also known as ADC, Physicians for Social Responsibility from Pennsylvania, Center for Protest Law and Litigation, and Center for Biological Diversity. We are truly and deeply grateful for your partnership and contributions to making this event a reality. We also have an amazing lineup of speakers tonight, including impacted frontline leaders in the fight against corporate overreach to silence our voices, movement leaders, corporate leaders, and policymakers to help underscore why this is a critical moment for reclaiming our voices and our rights to speak truth to power in defense of our planet. Also, folks, Congressman Jamie Raskin is going to be in the house, so gaddle up. Thank you all so much for making the time to join us and lending your great support to this critical fight. My name is Folabi Olagbaju, and I'm the Democracy Campaign Director with Greenpeace. I'm originally from Nigeria. The important thing to know about my immigrant background, besides my thick accent, which most of you already hear now, is that I grew my social justice teeth at the front line of popular protest as fossil fuel companies like Shell Oil collude with Nigerian military dictatorships to suppress protest against their business practices that cause massive ecological degradation and loss of livelihood in the oil-producing areas in my country. Unfortunately, we are seeing the same scenario play out here today in the United States, as extremist right-wing politicians, often at the behest of fossil fuel companies, push anti-protest measures at state levels and abuse the court system to criminalize protest and stifle dissent. Protest and free speech are fundamental to our democracy and are two of the most effective tools we have to advance our progressive agenda. And right now, those fundamental rights are under attack and at great risk. Our adversaries recognize that our voices are so important and our movement are growing stronger. Now, they are trying to do everything in their power to shut us down and shut us up. But we will not let them. It's not going to happen. This is why we are all here today. We have a great program tonight with an amazing lineup of speakers, including impacted frontline leaders in the fight against corporate overreach to silence our voices, movement leaders, corporate leaders, and policymakers to help us underscore why this is a critical moment for reclaiming our voices and our rights to speak truth to power in defense of our planet. With that on the side, let's dive in, folks. I want to bring in our first speaker tonight. Esther Calhoun is a frontline leader in our community of Uniontown, Alabama. A long-life activist, Esther is the co-founder and former president of Black Belt Citizens Fighting for Health and Justice. Esther has been at the front line of our community's fight to stop the dumping of coal ash in a landfill located in her hometown and operated by, get this, folks, a company called Green Group Holding. How cynical. I'm not making it up. For this, Esther was slapped by the company. Welcome to the program, Esther.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It has been a great honor getting to know you and your story of courage in the course of planning this event. I'm going to ask you some few questions. So, Esther, can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your community of Uniontown, Alabama, and why you decided to speak out against this landfill, and what were your demands?
Okay. My name is Esther Calhoun from Uniontown, Alabama. I was born and raised in Uniontown, and Uniontown is a community of 90% Black. And at first, when we heard about, the landfill, which we needed a landfill, but we was thinking about like a local landfill. And it came to about that it was about getting 33 states. And also it was not only going to be local trash, they was going to also accept coal ash from Kingston, Tennessee, which was 400 million tons of coal ash. And we knew what was happening in Kingston, Tennessee, because you read about it, everybody's hearing about it. Our first demand was that we didn't want coal ash, and we didn't want it from 33 states, because the simple fact, we stay in a rural area, and most of the time you raise, your own gardens and everything else, and we can hardly deal with a ton of coal. And the landfill, it was set, it was set directly in front of the residents. It's like you could throw a rock and it would be right there, 4 million tons of coal ash. And we started speaking out because I would go in the residence and talk to people. I've always been an activist. I started off as being in politics. Then I got a chance to know a lot of different people and their voices for what I was doing, because I knew that the people in the community, they know. If you need to know anything, who knows it best in the community? So they was telling how it smelled and the dust, and they was afraid. We all was afraid because we knew what was in coal ash. So we had one of the universities came down, Stafford University, but she wasn't recognized by our state government, which is ADEM, Alabama Department of Environment, because she did the testing of the water that was coming off the mountain of coal ash, and it would run into the property of Mr. Gibson. So she did a test and she found arsenic. So, but then, you look at some of the property that we didn't have tools. We didn't get our land praised, and we didn't get our soil tested. So there was tools that we didn't have.
Thank you, Esther. And what were your demands? What were you demanding from this company?
We was demanding them not to bring 33 states. We was demanding them not to have coal ash. We didn't want coal ash because, simple fact, it's a small community. And where they was putting it in was midst of the Black community, right in front of everyone's home. And we just didn't want coal ash. We knew how dangerous it was, and arsenic, and that 350 miles ride from Kingston, Tennessee. What was in it that wasn't going to be in it when it left Kingston? So that poison, I believe the poison was still there, and it's going to bring it in the community because they knew we didn't have tools. And our demand was no coal ash, no 33 states. And that was one of our demands.
Excellent, excellent. So Esther, could you talk about what it felt like when you found out that you are being sued? How much were you being sued for?
$30 million. It was four of us being sued for $30 million. It was Ben Eden, Mary Ellis, and Ellis Long and Mary Ellis and I was sued $30 million each. Well, I wasn't afraid because, in fact, what I'm gonna get $30 million for? And where I live, you look around, what's here worth $30 million? And I wasn't afraid, but we have to think about there's 4 people involved. And we was concerned about one of our people, and that was Ben Eden, who is the president of Black Belt Citizen now, because his wife was, she was sick. So we had to think about her and him That's why, we was concerned about, because I wanted to go all the way. I said, sue us. I didn't do anything wrong. You have a right to speak out. We had a right. We didn't do anything wrong. We was just speaking out, trying to save our community. What else we was going to do? So they sued us for $30 million. And I still said freedom of speech. They even wanted our computer. They wanted all the footage off Facebook, everything. But we said, no, you're not getting that. I mean, we have a right to speak out, and that's what we was doing. We have a right to protect our community, and that's what we was doing.
Great, amazing, exactly. That's what you should be doing. Because these bullies, all they want to do is shut you down and shut you up. But you got to keep speaking. That is how to defeat those kind of people. So, Esther, can you share a little bit about why you keep fighting? What motivates you? What inspires you to keep fighting this fight?
Well, I look at Martin Luther King. I look at Fairleigh Hyman. I mean, I look at people that have already done fights. They went through a lot. And then I look at my community. I was the voice of the community. I started off a concerned citizen, and that was like speaking out. And we did politics, and we was trying to get this particular commissioner out, which was Johnny Flowers, and he was the one that wanted coal ash. And that's when I really started out wanting to start fight, was to go out and start telling people why Johnny Flowers shouldn't be a commissioner. We don't need coal ash. He grew up in this area, and that's why I really started. And also I started off with, I was dealing with police brutality with my son, because when you become an activist, you start speaking out against corruption, you're a target. And my family has been targeted and still been targeted because I'm an activist and I'm not afraid to speak out. And I will continue to speak out because you have a voice. Someone has to stand up. And I've never been afraid. You have to speak out about what's going on. It's just too much. And then the landfill was adjacent to our cemetery, which is a Black cemetery that was given to the Blacks in 1856, I think, 57 of the day, can't remember. But anyway, they took heavy equipment in my ancestors' cemetery, and they drove the heavy bulldozers over the graves. Now I no longer know where my ancestors are. I think that was one of the intimidation that they did, because they knew I had a brother, great-grandmother, and grandfather, and the second cousin, no telling how many more, but who takes heavy equipment into a cemetery?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And how could somebody like you come up with $30 million, in that area? Anyway, so is there an advice, that you want to share with anyone else who is facing a similar threat? Because a lot of individuals are also being slapped. So what kind of advice will you offer to somebody who is facing a situation like yours?
Well, I have this thing. I say, step out your comfort zone and stay focused. Because if you stay focused, you're not going to focus on racism. You're not going to focus on hate. You're going to focus on what your goal is. Our goal was justice. And you can easily be, misled to start hating. And it wasn't about hating. It's about speaking out. It's about educating. It's about not being silent. And those are one of my things. I never want to be silent. I don't want people to be silent. And where I came from, in a small community, and the only tools we really had was media. And why should I shut up? And the more people are educated, the more people would boost me up, not only me, but having the voice of like Project South, other people's coming down and really pursuing this corruption, because it's all about corruption. It's all about white supremacy. It's all about racism. It's all about economic racism. That's when you don't have, you can get good jobs, but why bring coal ash to a place that's going to destroy your community? And I had to fight. I had to keep talking. And I continue to talk because I want to educate people. Just because you get sued doesn't mean you're supposed to just shut up. Step out your comfort zone. When you're feeling uncomfortable, that means you're working. That means you're really working.
Right on. Thank you so much, Esther, for your courageous stand in the face of this adversity. And thank you also much for what you do for your community and for sharing your story here tonight. So hang in there, because during the Q&A, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be wanting to ask you many questions. So just hang out with us here. That is right. Like Esther said, SLAPP suits are bullying tactics using to silence us, but we refuse to be silenced. So now I want to bring in my good friend and colleague, Deepa Padmanabhan. Deepa is Greenpeace Deputy Counsel and has been defending the organization against these SLAPP lawsuits for most of our time since she joined the Greenpeace about 11 years ago. Besides being a super terrific lawyer and a staunch defender of Greenpeace values and mission, Deepa is an amazing and wonderful human being and has always been a source of inspiration to me personally. Welcome to the program, Deepa.
Thank you, my dear Falabi.
So great to have you here, even though I see you every day almost. So, Deepa, you have been defending Greenpeace from these bogus lawsuits for 7 years. Can you share with our audience what the Standing Rock SLAPP lawsuit is about? Why is the Standing Rock SLAPP lawsuit more than about the future of Greenpeace? And why are SLAPP suits such a threat to our movement? Those are 3 questions in one. You can take it in whatever order you want.
Yeah, thank you, Falabi. So I definitely am going to get into all that, but I'm feeling the spirit of Esther, and she reminds us of our power and our collective force and what we can accomplish when we're all in it together. So I really want to take this moment just to kick things off with a victory. I think sometimes we don't celebrate victories enough. And actually, in April of this year, Greenpeace defeated a 7-year lawsuit brought by Resolute Forest Products, one of Canada's largest logging companies. And this company sued us for $100 million after we had a public campaign that challenged their harmful forestry practices. This was 7 years of fighting, 7 years where they tried to really just wear us down. But so many of you stuck with us. And so this isn't just Greenpeace's win, this is our win. Resolute has, of course, appealed the decision because they want to drag this on as long as they can. But I just think it's important for us to all remember what we can accomplish together. And we had this victory. We've also had some wins along the way. So now let's go back to when this all started. That was in 2016. And that's when they first came after us with RICO. And yes, that's the Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, a set of laws designed to go after the mafia. And they didn't just come after us with this once, they came after us twice. First, it was Resolute, and then 1 year later, it was Energy Transfer, the company behind the Dakota Access pipeline. So what these corporations were doing was they were trying to equate our right to speak out against their destructive practices with work for organized crime. But you know what? We came together in that moment. We confronted those claims head on, and we got RICO thrown out of both cases. So now going back to Falabi's questions, unfortunately, our fight didn't end there, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. So Energy Transfer. Energy Transfer recognizes the power of the resistance at Standing Rock, the power of our movements. And because of that, they're putting everything they can into destroying our ability to speak out, organize, and protest. And even though we did get RICO thrown out, we still face a $300 million lawsuit in North Dakota State Court, where Energy Transfer alleges that Greenpeace orchestrated the entire resistance movement at Standing Rock. Now, you and I know that Standing Rock was an Indigenous-led movement. What Energy Transfer is trying to do is rewrite history. Energy Transfer's narrative is that Greenpeace is a criminal enterprise that went into Standing Rock with the intent of training violent protesters. And the company intentionally chose to file the lawsuit where the protests occurred because their Standing Rock still elicits an incredible amount of motion. There is a high degree of hostility toward non-local individuals and organizations who were involved, who are often seen as outside agitators by the local community. And there is a feeling that somebody should be held accountable for what the people feel they went through. Energy Transfer wants that to be Greenpeace. And with every passing day in this lawsuit, it's more and more clear that the intent behind the case is not just to destroy Greenpeace, it is to destroy the movement and our right to protest. So to do this, Energy Transfer is trying to create incredibly dangerous precedent that any trainer at a protest should be held responsible for the actions of every person present at that protest. So in other words, a trainer who teaches principles of nonviolence, safety, and de-escalation should be held responsible for the actions of an unknown person who sets fire to construction equipment or uses Molotov cocktails. And this is not the only place we are seeing these attacks. There's another case in Louisiana involving a Black Lives Matter protest. And DeRay McKesson organized a nonviolent protest where an unknown individual threw a rock that hit an officer. The officer is attempting to hold McKesson liable, arguing that this act was foreseeable in a nonviolent protest. It is no coincidence that we are seeing these attacks in Indigenous and Black-led movements. And it's also no coincidence that both movements are primary targets in new anti-protest legislation, enhancing the criminal penalties for protest activity. So for several years, Greenpeace has been fighting these cases tooth and nail because we have to. Our very existence is at stake. But we're not just fighting for us. We know this case has huge implications for the movement. And we have to think about what winning can look like irrespective of what happens in the legal case. How can Greenpeace and the movement come out of this stronger and more powerful no matter the outcome? We have to show corporations that this is a losing tactic so they won't think twice about going after other activists or organizations. This is a test case. So I just want to end by reminding everyone that SLAPPs are driven by fear. We are winning, our movements are growing stronger than ever, and these corporations are feeling the force of people power. SLAPPs are a response to this fear. They're a desperate attempt to put a price tag on First Amendment protected activity. So the most important thing we can do at this moment, as Esther said, make our movement stronger, louder, and more effective than ever. We are fighting the legal fight in the courtroom, but there is also a movement fight that we have to win. And we need you. We need you to help us get this story out there. We need you to take action to protect our communities and our planet. And we need you by our side when Greenpeace and the movement go to trial next July. It is through our collective action that we will send a message to these corporations that we will not be silenced. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you. That's totally right on. This movement fight, we cannot afford to lose. And I'm so happy that we have more than 500 people on this call. This is what the movement looks like. This is truly what the movement looks like. Thank you, Deepa, again. I've always known and hope our audience tonight can now see why you are such a big thorn in the side of our adversary lawyers. Thank you so much for all you do for Greenpeace. I want to let folks know we might have some time for Q&A. We hope to have some time for Q&A. So please keep putting your questions in the Q&A portal, and we will try to get to them after the speakers finish their presentation. Also want to let you know that Congressman Raskin is running a little bit late. As such, we are going to move on to Cork, and we will bring in the congressman when he gets in. Most people and organizations don't, like Deepa said, most people and organizations don't have the kind of resources that Greenpeace has to fight this kind of massive corporate lawsuits. As you also know, merely filing these suits can silence powerful voices. And so Greenpeace is fighting back, not just for us, but for everyone who depends on the right to free speech. We are also a founding member of the Protect the Protest Coalition, because as you will hear from Cork today, an attack on one is an attack on all of us. Now, I want to bring in Cork Haberson. Cork is a senior policy advisor at the Artrights International, which is another founding member of the Protect the Protest Coalition. Cork has been working tirelessly to bring the federal anti-SLAPP legislation across the finish line. I bet Cork lives and breathes anti-SLAPP legislation right now and can recite the draft language backward, if you ask him. Welcome to the program.
I won't do that. Thank you so much, Falabi, and thank you, Deepa and Esther as well. And yeah, thank you for organizing this, and also thank you for sharing your story. The purpose of SLAPP lawsuits and these, judicial attacks is to silence us and to silence movements. And Greenpeace has responded by doing the opposite and speaking up and sharing the story and trying, being really generous with showing how this is affecting both their organization, but also more broadly the movement, so we can work together and respond in force. So my name is Kirk Herbertson, and I'm a senior policy advisor at Earth Rights International, which is an environmental and human rights nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. So we're working globally on the front lines of the climate crisis to support activists and communities who are being targeted by companies for standing up and defending their rights to natural resources. So because we're a global organization, I want to just step back for just a second and look at the global context of what's happening here. So as everyone on the Zoom call knows, democracy is under threat in the US. It's also under threat more broadly globally. And one of the key challenges that's happening is that there's a crisis of attacks against those who are speaking up on behalf of their communities, on behalf of social justice movements. The attacks are taking the form of assassinations. So there's hundreds that are being murdered every year. There's wrongful imprisonments, there's smear campaigns, illegal surveillance, and judicial harassment. There's a nonprofit organization that is part of Protect the Protest Coalition called the Business and Human Rights Resource Center that is tracking the attacks related to businesses. And they found for last year in 2022, they tracked 555 attacks on human rights defenders by businesses that, across the world. Of those 555 attacks, 75% were targeting people who are speaking about environmental and land issues. A lot of businesses see people speaking about environmental issues, land issues, local community issues as a threat to their power and to their access to these resources. And the most common attack is judicial harassment. About half of the attacks globally are coming in the form of judicial harassment. And we're here today to talk specifically about one tactic, SLAPP lawsuits, strategic lawsuits against public participation. This is the weapon of choice in the United States. In the United States, you're not going to see, like in other countries, as many assassinations of people who speak up on behalf of their communities, but judicial harassment and SLAPPs are the way to have a disguised attack in order to silence critics. We do not have a full, we don't have a full sense of the number of attacks. We know they're happening, across the country. They're affecting dozens, if not hundreds, of people each year. But to give you one example, so last year, Earth Rights, my organization, did research into what the fossil fuel industry is doing. And we found that over the last 10 years, the fossil fuel industry has targeted activists, scientists, community leaders, and others more than 150 times with judicial harassment, most of those through SLAPPs. Others who are speaking up with other industries are affected as well. These with SLAPP lawsuits, these are bogus lawsuits that ultimately should be dismissed by a court because they're meritless and frivolous, but that's not how they have an effect. They have an effect by running up the costs. They're very intimidating to be hit with a lawsuit by a much more powerful and well-resourced opponent. They drain your resources. They take away from your time from doing advocacy and speaking up on behalf of your community. They isolate you from your colleagues and from other movements. And so when the SLAPP lawsuits using the RICO statute were filed against Greenpeace, I think now more than 5 years ago, those of us in civil society saw this as an existential threat. If a precedent was set where a company can come in and say that nonviolent protest is the same thing as criminal racketeering, and that you can be on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars, that is enough to shut down civil society and social justice movements across the country. That is a serious threat. So we came together and we created the Protect the Protest Coalition about 5 years ago. The idea behind Protect the Protest is that if you come after one of us, you come after all of us. It's, we have collective power together, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to work together to make sure that we have all the resources, we know our rights, we respond in the courtrooms, we respond in the media together. And the stakes could not be higher. We're talking about free speech today. Free speech is the bedrock of our democracy. It's the bedrock of any kind of response we want to have against the global climate crisis. If we want public health for communities, we need people who are willing to speak up and say what, when things are happening wrong. This is very important. Free speech, we should all need to be defending free speech. So with Protect the Protest, I wanted to highlight 3 parts of the solution of what we're doing. So first of all, just the creation of the coalition. Number 1, stick together. So, we are working together. Most of the members of Protect the Protest are from professional civil society organizations, but we're also working closely with grassroots leaders and others across the country. We are providing legal support, legal advice, communication support, know your rights training. And there's Mo has just put the link to the coalition's website in the chat. I also want to highlight, we are doing this at a national level. You can also do this at a local level. So if you're working with others, just make sure that if one of your colleagues in the movement is targeted at the local level, you can stick together on this. Number 1, stick together. Number 2, SLAPP legislation. So, SLAPPs do not belong in the court system. They are an abuse of the court system. They're a manipulation of processes that were set in place to help people secure access to justice. And this needs a legislative fix. Right now, 33 out of 50 states, plus Washington, D.C., have SLAPP laws in place, but there's no protection at the federal level. This is a problem, both because the laws at the state level are a bit patchy, so there's different levels of protections, but it also means that without federal protection and without protection in other states, corporations are able to do what's called forum shopping. If they don't like the SLAPP law in California, then they can just, in many cases, can file their lawsuit in North Dakota, where there isn't a SLAPP law. That's the kind of thing where they can move around. So we need universal coverage at the state and federal level. And I see that Congressman Raskin has joined. Thank you so much, sir, for taking time, because Congressman Raskin, is, as we all know, is a champion for free speech and democracy in this country. And last year has introduced important federal legislation that would really help, go a long ways towards closing this gap, creating the coverage at the federal level, and also helping to protect what's happening at the state level. So the way that SLAPP legislation works, so first of all, when a company or a powerful actor files a SLAPP lawsuit, they're not doing it the way that most people who would file a lawsuit. They're not trying to seek justice or remedies. They're trying to drag their opponent through lengthy litigation, run up the costs, and intimidate them so that they agree to be silent. So the way that this legislation works is that it gives courts the tools that they need to quickly identify SLAPPs and throw them out, and make sure that these cost burdens are not put on the people who are targeted with SLAPPs. So SLAPP legislation, number 2, really important. That's one thing that we'll need all of your help with in pushing for in Congress, and then in all of the states where there's not protections right now. And then the third point, which we'll hear more about later, is private sector leadership. And I just wanted to say that among companies, peer pressure works. Companies watch what other companies are doing. And so if we have companies that are willing to stand up in defense of free speech and democracy, we can get other companies to follow suit and agree not to take on, use these abusive practices in the court against people who might criticize them or otherwise say things they don't agree with. But many are hesitant to be first movers and come out with a clear vision. And so it's really great that Ben & Jerry's is here to talk about their role, as a leader in the community. So we're grateful for them joining today as well. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Cock. I really appreciate you. We also appreciate the Protest Coalition for protecting activists from corporate attacks in the US, and your solidarity stands with Greenpeace. It is now time to put a stop on our First Amendment rights. As Cock mentioned, last fall, Representative Jamie Raskin introduced the Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation Protection Act, a bill that would deter other corporations from filing SLAPP lawsuits and to protect everyone's right to speak out against injustice. So please welcome Jamie Raskin, my very own representative, representing Maryland's 8th Congressional District, the ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability in the 118th Congress, and professor of constitutional law at American University's Washington College of Law for more than 25 years. Thank you, Congressman, sir, for taking the time to join us today.
Falabi, thank you for that very generous, warm introduction. I'm delighted to be with all my friends from Greenpeace and all the other groups on the front lines of the battle to defend our environment, our climate, and our future against rapacious corporate predators who don't respect the rule of law and don't respect the protection of the environment. I mean, the way that I see it is all over the world now, it's the autocrats like in Moscow and the kleptocrats like in Mar-a-Lago and the theocrats in Saudi Arabia and in Texas and in Mississippi against the Democrats. I'm using the small d, against those people who will defend democracy. And we have to defend and save our democracy and our freedom if we have any chance of saving a habitable planet for people on Earth. So we got to save the democracy in order to save the climate. We know the autocrats will not do it. We know that the petrocrats will not do it. We know the kleptocrats like Trump will not do it. The theocrats will not do it. It is only the people defending democracy who are going to do it. And so the struggle for democracy is the struggle for the environment. Now, in this struggle that we're in, we're also up against the odds of vast economic and financial inequality, because the corporate forces that don't want to be bound by any environmental laws or regulations or labor laws or labor regulations have vast reservoirs of wealth with which to try and defeat us. And so the rule of law is a danger to them, which is why they need to, one, pack the courts, and then two, use litigation as a way to try to squelch freedom of speech and people's protest and people's dissent from what they're doing to the planet and what they're doing to worker rights and what they're doing to the rights of the people and the public interest. So we obviously need to be defending the courts and opposing the Federalist Society and the corruption of the judiciary by Justice Roberts, by Clarence and Ginny Thomas, by, well, you name it. I mean, any and all of them are out there. Brett Kavanaugh and Mrs. Waterford, all of them are driving us to the right, rapidly undermining voting rights, trashing environmental law, inventing new doctrines like the major questions doctrine to try to shut down public regulation of environmental polluters. Well, the anti-SLAPP movement, it's not a cure-all, it's not a panacea, but it does say if they are using lawsuits in a way clearly to try to stifle First Amendment expression and public speech, and we can show that in court, then we've got an opportunity to move the whole motion to dismiss process up, because these bottomless pocket corporate actors would be very happy to tie us up in knots for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And if they lose, they don't care. They waltz away having shut down the protest and shut down the movement. So the anti-SLAPP statutes give us the opportunity to expedite the hearing of these cases right away, to say this is an attempt to shut down our freedom of speech, our freedom of participation, and we want the court to hear it right away in order to dismiss this action and then to shift the burden on these people who've engaged in vindictive, retaliatory, and frivolous litigation to pay for the court expenses for both sides. So they've got to pay for it if they knowingly undertake a lawsuit, just try to shut people down. So I was able to introduce this in Maryland. It's in a majority of the states now. I think it's in 33 or 34 of the states across the country. We need it at the federal level. We need that in order to protect people's right to protest. Thank you for organizing the groups together to stand up for the right to protest, for the right to speak out at city council meetings, in town council meetings, and state legislatures, publishing online, what have you, to protect the basic rights of the people. Because at this point, what they've got on their side is power, money, and inequality. And what we've got on our side is the people and the willingness of the people to stand up for democracy, stand up for the Bill of Rights and Freedom. So that's what we're trying to do with the anti-SLAPP litigation in Congress. So please let your members of Congress know they need to get on this. It's a critical means of legal and political self-defense against the onset of power to try to squelch the voice of the people. So thank you for having me. I yield back, and please keep up all of your excellent work.
Thank you, Senator Raskin, for all you have done and will continue to do for your constituents and the country at large. We indeed owe you a debt of gratitude. And I'm so proud that you are my representative. Thank you so much for all you do for us.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, folks, now you hear it. We have people power. We don't have the money that all these people have, all these business hegemons have, but we have people. You heard it from Representative Raskin. We got to mobilize. We got to get people power to really get to where we need to be. Most people and organizations don't have the resources that Greenpeace have to really fight this war and to fight this battle. I want to bring in my friend Chris Miller, who I've been working with now since I joined Greenpeace 3 years ago. Every time I call in, he's always listen to my call. He's always been really, he's the activist manager for Ben & Jerry's. He's a former Greenpeacer. Chris has also been involved for more than 2 decades in everything from complex legislative battles to grassroots issue advocacy for big NGOs. At Ben & Jerry's, Chris has been using the company's social reach to, and it's a lot of scoop shops, which I visit very often, and it's farm-based to get results. Chris was also instrumental in getting Ben & Jerry's to sign our private sector pledge not to use SLAPPs. He joined us today and is going to be talking about why corporations must speak out against these SLAPP lawsuits. Welcome, Chris. Great to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Falabi. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And I want to thank you and the team at Greenpeace. I'm incredibly honored to briefly address folks and to be on the panel with Esther, Deepa, Kirk, and Congressman Raskin. So I sort of have the unenviable position of representing the corporate community on the call tonight. A position that feels a little uncomfortable, but I'm here to tell you that the corporate community is not a monolith. But corporate voices matter on this issue because for better or for worse, and too often it's for worse, as we've heard some of the stories tonight, companies are incredibly influential and they have, as Congressman Raskin said, very deep pockets. And so it's incredibly important for companies. I think it was Kirk who suggested that we want to create a counter to the companies that are using this tactic in an attempt to accelerate the climate crisis, to put a stop to free speech and peaceful protest in the country. So I think let me just briefly talk about the pledge, which I'm proud that we've been able to sign along with several other companies. I want to thank Global Citizen and Protect the Protest for helping organize companies around this pledge. And the pledge essentially says that companies who sign on to this will do a couple of things, but first and foremost, they will pledge not to use this tactic to silence free speech or the voice of protesters. And it recognizes the critical role that civil society organizations and human rights defenders play in creating the kind of environment that allows the private sector to flourish. And just a brief reflection on my own experience. As Falabi noted, I'm a Greenpeace alum, but I've spent about half of my career in the private sector. And I want to tell you all that the work that you do as advocates, as activists, as campaigners and protesters are beneficial to those of us that are doing this work inside corporations. In my 10 years at Ben & Jerry's, there have been several organizations that have campaigned against Ben & Jerry's. And while at times it feels painful in the moment, those campaigns end up making us better as a company. And so as I think it was perhaps Kirk mentioned, companies do listen and companies can be pushed. And so I would encourage you to continue to put pressure on companies to join this pledge. At Ben & Jerry's, we are committed to helping Falabi and others build the number of corporations that are willing to sign on to the pledge. And I think in an increasingly polarized environment on these issues, there isn't a middle ground on this issue. I think companies are either going to stand up and stand with defenders of free speech and the right to peaceful protest, or they will be seen as part of the problem. And so I'm incredibly pleased to be here tonight. I think, I'm honored to be on the panel, and I look forward to working with you all to defend the right to free speech and public protests. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Chris. So you all see now, if you all show Chris as much love as I do show him, you will also all be getting your own lifetime supply of your favorite Ben & Jerry's ice cream flavor, just like I do. So thank you so much.
That's right.
Chris. Appreciate you. Now, not only do we want corporations to sign the anti-SLAPP pledge, we also want all of you here to join us and to commit to take actions to end the use of these lawsuits that seek to silence us. I'm now going to turn it over to my Greenpeace colleague, Adrian Lowry, who works with our volunteer program to speak to tonight's take action, call to action. Lowry, Adrian, are you there?
I am. Hey, everybody.
Take it away.
Hi, y'all. So my name is Adrienne Lowry. I use she and her pronouns. And like Falabi said, I have the absolute privilege to be an organizer here at Greenpeace and get to work with volunteers and activists like all of you every single day. I've also been sharing my screen throughout this entire presentation, but I had to stop sharing my screen to talk to you all and look at the over 500 faces and names who are on the call right now. I want us all to take a minute and just think of that number. Over 500 people have joined us today to hear about what's going on with SLAPP lawsuits. This right here is the movement that we are building. This right here is why we are going to win. So first of all, thank you all so much for joining. And like Falabi said, we've heard from a bunch of different speakers today, right? We've heard from individuals on the front lines fighting against SLAPP lawsuits that they've personally been affected by. We've heard of organizations and coalitions coming together to defend each other. We've heard from representatives pushing legislation to stop SLAPP, and we've heard of organizations pushing each other to do the right thing. So what can we all do right now in this moment after hearing these amazing speakers to have our own piece of this movement? Well, hopefully in the chat right now, I'm looking at all my other wonderful tech people who've helped make this call possible alongside me. You should be seeing a link to a pledge. There are so many of you today. It's amazing and very unheard of recently to see this number of people. So you might see it get taken over, but we'll keep on posting it in the pledge. This is a pledge that each and every one of us right now are going to be taking. And I can see the back end of this pledge, y'all. So I'll see if you signed it or not tonight. I want to see over 500 names on this pledge after today to represent all the people who have joined us tonight. This is a pledge to join the movement to end SLAPPs. This is a huge issue, as we've heard over and over and over again. Now, I'm not going to talk too long because we're almost done with this call, but we know how big a movement this is. But y'all, we have a plan, or the beginnings of a plan, for what we're building to make sure that SLAPPs do not affect any more organizations or individuals. We have the legal front, ending lawsuits like the one Greenpeace is facing right now that Esther has faced in the past. We have the legislative piece of this, making sure that we pass legislation on both the national and the state level to make sure that these bogus lawsuits cannot be used anymore. And then we have my personal favorite as an organizer, the movement angle of how we push this forward, how we come together and we make sure that we stand united to stop this. Because where they might have money and power, y'all, we have people. We have 500 people who show up on a Tuesday to learn more about SLAPPs. We have 500 people who are going to go talk to their friends and their family and their community to make sure they join this people. We have 500 people who are going to show up when we need them next. And that's what signing this pledge is. Signing this pledge is saying, raising your hand to learn more about SLAPPs, raising your hand to take action when national legislation comes out, raising your hand to tell your friends and your family. So please sign this pledge, get involved, and join this movement. Now, I know we said we're going to be answering some questions, so I'm going to pass it back to Falabi, though also noting that we only have about 5 minutes. But please, right now, I'm looking at you in the eyes or looking at your name on the screen. Make sure you sign this pledge, because I want to make sure you have 500 today and 1,000 tomorrow, so you can stop SLAPPs once and for all. Falabi, I'll hand it back to you.
Adrian, thank you so much. Yes, it's going to take people power to stop this bogus legal tactics that is used to silence our voices. I believe we do have some time for some questions. You've always been very, very good and patient listening to us. Now we have a few questions, and I'm going to try to put one out here. Somebody put on the Q&A panel. How does money in politics affect this issue? What can we do about it? And do anyone here wants to take that question? Cork, Deepa, anyone wants to take it on the panel quickly for a minute?
Sure, I'm happy to. I mean, money in politics is really at the heart of this issue. What's happening here is corporations are able to buy the right to speak out, because as some of us have referenced, there's not actually an idea that these lawsuits are going to win, or that, you know, the people filing them are going to succeed. But by filing the lawsuit, the cost of defending is so big that it has the intended effect often of silencing if you don't have the resources to fight back. So it's corporate power that is allowing corporations, you know, with these SLAPP suits, with anti-protest laws, to basically buy the right to speak and buy censorship from critics, from the speech that they don't want to hear.
Thank you, Deepa. So I think we have room for one more question. I'm going to try to put this to Cork. How are these lawsuits not thrown out as frivolous lawsuits, and those who file them not punished for wasting the court's time?
So the court process, a normal lawsuit often takes years. Even if it's the most ridiculous lawsuit in the world, it's still a process that the court has to follow. It's just the way that the court system is set up. You know, you file a complaint, there's all these motions, that can be discovery. It's a very long process. It can get very expensive the further it goes in the process. So, you know, just by the act of filing a lawsuit, you're probably already buying yourself a few years in court where, you know, you can force the defendant to have to defend during that. So the goal of the SLAPP legislation is to cut down that time. So it gives courts this ability to look at the lawsuit right away when it's filed and say, this is a SLAPP, it's out. You know, that's what we're trying to do. And then before the company that's filing the lawsuit, or whoever is filing the lawsuit, can, you know, run up the costs and drag it out for 5, 6, 7 years.
Thank you, Cork. I don't think we have time to go through all these questions, but we are going to note these questions and use them to inform some document or information that we send out to you all following this call. I want to thank the audience for being here today. I want to reemphasize what Adrian said about the People's Pledge. It is a different one than the corporate pledge. Please sign in on today before you get off this call. They are both important, and we need both of them to win this fight. I also want to thank all the Greenpeace staff who worked tirelessly on this work. Mo, Kimberg, Adrian, Carson, and all these Greenpeace folks that really put a lot of time on this. Thank you all so much. You're all wonderful. You're all really great. I want to thank our speakers, Esther, Chris, Cork, of course, Deepa. Thank you all so much for all you're doing. And of course, my own congressman, Jamie Raskin, who is no longer here, but I will be giving him my thanks when I see him in person. Definitely want to thank our co-sponsors, Protect the Protest Coalition, and all the members who are here. This concludes our program. However, the fight against SLAPP continues, and we shall win. Thank you all so much.